Jamie is an ODK 5-Star Society inductee, and she is currently a co-advisor for the FFA Circle of ODK. Please give her your undivided attention, and Jamie, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys today and to talk about articulating all of these great experiences that you have gotten you into ODK and that you've gained in ODK. I want to spend some time with you guys today talking about how to articulate those experiences for job interviews and internship interviews. How do we tell our story most effectively when we are talking to our future employers, graduate schools, things like that? So we're gonna go through some material here. As we go through, if you guys have questions or comments or anything, I have the chat window open on my end, and so y'all can ask questions in the chat. I'm also comfortable if you want to unmute. Yeah, you can use the chat. We'll keep an eye on it there. But feel free to ask questions as we go. There is going to be an interactive component to this as well. Later, we're going to utilize the breakout rooms and spend a little bit of time practicing articulating some of these experiences. So you'll want to be ready for that later on. I'll give you plenty of warning, but we are going to have some interactive components to it to give you the chance to practice some of the skills that I'm going to be coaching you guys in today. So Eve Marie gave you all my introduction. So I have worked here at Stephen F. Austin for about 12 years. I was the Leadership and Service Programs Assistant Director. I've worked in academic advising, and I have spent the past 5 years leading our Center for Career and Professional Development. So my day-to-day involves a lot of career coaching, a lot of mock interviews, employer relations, encouraging employers to come recruit our outstanding students here at Stephen F. Austin, and then overseeing some marketing and outreach efforts for the office. So I have spent a lot of time working with student leaders over the years and have seen a lot of really great examples of articulating skills and telling our story, and a lot of not so great examples in there. And so we're going to talk about how to be on the great example side of it, how to articulate all these skills and experiences that got you into ODK. How do we tell that story most effectively in the interview process? We're going to start out with talking a little bit about what are the skills that employers are seeking. So it can feel impossible to know exactly what employers are looking for. Sometimes it seems like you have to be a little bit of a mind reader. You know, are you expected to pore over every single job description that's out there in order to tally a list of these different skills that they're looking for? So, but really there are a lot of resources that can give you insight into what these potential employers are looking for in their new hires. We're going to review some of those resources today, and we'll discuss what experiences you're gaining through your collegiate experience that are a direct fit for what those employers are looking for, and how to articulate those skills in a way that that shows that you can do the work. Excuse me. So some of the research and the data that we're using to support this coaching here. So NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. They are kind of the professional organization for career services. It's an interesting organization because it has membership that is comprised of both career services, university career services offices, as well as employers. So it's a great way for career services professionals to be able to share best practices, gain access to research and things like that. On the employer side, their membership allows them to, again, kind of gain access to networking opportunities and research, but it also allows a lot of collaboration between career services and employers. It's important that we've got a pretty solid bridge there so that employers can keep up with trends on the university side, but so that your career services professionals can then keep up with hiring trends. And we can also kind of keep a close eye on what it is that employers are looking for, because it does change over time. So every year, NACE conducts a survey to its membership and to employers, asking them to identify asking employers to identify the skills that they are most interested in their new hires. So this report that I have pulled some of this information from here is from 2020. So the survey was done in fall of 2019. So the survey is repeated every year. It is important to generate, to keep an eye on this regularly, because just as things tend to change, we want to keep an eye on every year, what are the skills that the employers are looking for. So, the most recent job outlook from NACE is available, but they focused some of their survey questions on a little bit different things this time. I think the pandemic has just changed some of the questions that they're asking. There's lots of questions in there about hiring trends and things like that. But so the most recent survey that involved the skills section was from fall of 2019. So we're going to look at how employers view their candidates and the types of skills that they're looking for in the new hires. This will connect back to articulating these experiences, because we want you guys reflecting on what are the skills and experiences that you're gaining through college, and how am I going to tell those stories to the employers. But in order to know what examples you need to generate, we have to have a good sense of what the skills are that the employers are looking for. What are the things that I'm most likely to be asked about as a candidate? So we'll start first with looking a little bit at how employers view candidates. So we're going to start with looking at the skills that new hires need. So this is the skill set that has come up. Honestly, it's come up across the past couple of years. This skill set, these 8 competencies, haven't changed very much. They may shift around a little bit in kind of the order list for the employers, but pretty much these 8 have been solid for a while. So what are some things that we notice in here? This is not specific to any particular industry, job, or major. There are about 150 employers that responded to the survey that made up the data set that we're looking at here. And these employers represented, a pretty wide variety of industries. They come from a wide variety of locations. But what this tells us is that there's a lot of overlap between these different industries and majors and careers. So let's go through them a little bit. So first on that list is critical thinking and problem solving. So they are looking for employees who can exercise sound reasoning, utilize originality and inventiveness, that you are able to think critically and solve problems in the workplace. Second is that professionalism and work ethic. Do you have effective work habits? Are you able to stay on task? Are you accountable for mistakes that you make? Do you utilize ethical behavior, ethical decision-making skills? Are you able to learn from those mistakes? So they don't expect you to be perfect, but they do expect accountability and a willingness to learn whenever something doesn't go right. Third, oral and written communication skills. Are you able to clearly articulate your thoughts and ideas, both in writing and when speaking? This is important when you think about, hiring people to be on your team who represent your brand. You need to know that the people that you're hiring are able to, conduct themselves professionally, are able to send well-written emails, are able to speak clearly and articulately, to other people. Leadership, so the ability to leverage the strength of others in order to achieve common goals, using interpersonal skills to coach or develop others, and being able to organize, prioritize, and delegate work. I will say this does not mean that you necessarily have to have a formal leadership title in order to utilize leadership in the workplace. There are lots of times that we are asked to step up in informal leadership positions that still allow us to utilize these skills. We can't always be the team leader, but there are lots of opportunities to still exhibit leadership skills in the workplace, even when you're not the formal leader of a team. Digital technology is another one. What this means as far as those softwares or platforms, this does vary widely depending on your industry. But the employers want to know that you're familiar with the platforms and softwares that are commonly utilized within that field. And that if you don't have direct experience with it, that you have experience in familiarizing yourself and getting on board quickly with new technology. Teamwork and collaboration. You know, college is made up of lots and lots of group work. Our student organizations are also comprised of a lot of groups, executive boards, membership committees. So, employers are looking for people who can be collaborative, who can develop good working relationships with others, who are able to work well within a team structure, that you are contributing, whether you are the leader or a member of that team, and that you can negotiate and manage conflict. That, when working with people, that conflict in some way, shape, or form tends to be a big part of the process sometimes. And so they are looking for people who can effectively, negotiate and manage that conflict so that we can get back to the work that we're trying to do. Global and intercultural fluency. So this means, being open and inclusive and sensitive to others, being appreciative of differing perspectives than your own. The way that this plays out in the workplace, can vary a little bit. So when we think about we're hiring teachers, we want to know that you are going to be ready and willing to work with any student who's assigned in your class, regardless of their background, their socioeconomic status, that you have an appreciation for that student and that you understand that all students have equal rights to a quality education. So, but being willing to work with others who are different than you and appreciative of those differences. And then finally, career management. I think this one is interesting because this has to do more with you. Employers are looking to hire people who are coachable, who have a demonstrated interest in becoming better at what they do. They want to learn new skills. They want to gain new experiences. They are looking for ways to not only improve their own skills, but to figure out how they can bring more value to the organization. So, the ability to manage one's career, that may feel like a skill that is more about us, but employers have a vested interest in this as well. They want to know that you're going to take advantage of professional development opportunities or mentoring opportunities, because those then can help the organization grow and be better. So these are the eight kind of core NACE competencies that employers tell us that they're looking for. You can see how these can be applicable to pretty much any job. It's not an exhaustive list of skills. It's not all that you may be asked to do in a position, but you can see how an accountant maybe would utilize all of these skills. A nurse utilizes all of these skills. A teacher utilizes all of these skills. They may play out a little differently. They may look a little different depending on the industry, but at the core of what the employer is looking for, you can really kind of dig back to these 8 skills. Is a great way to get started and thinking about what are the different experiences that I may be asked about in an interview that I need to be prepared to offer examples for. So that said, I've talked for a little bit. What kind of, do y'all have any questions about that NACE report or any of these skills? Any comments upon looking at these, these sets of skills that employers tell us through research that they're looking for? Just any kind of feedback or insights so far from those of y'all in the meeting. Were there any skills that you thought might show up on here that don't? Like, are you surprised by what's included or maybe what is not included on this top 8 list of the skills? All right. Everyone's being very quiet. In a little while, y'all are gonna have to chat with each other when we drop into breakout rooms. But if you are looking at this list and you're wondering why maybe something doesn't show up on here, again, these are just kind of the top 8. There are lots and lots of skills that employers are looking for, or things that are maybe very specific to your field or to your industry that don't pop up on here. So this isn't all of the skills, but this is kind of a comprehensive core list of those skills that the employers tell us that they're looking for. All right. So other places that we can generate, lists of skills. So to help to guide us in reflecting on our co-curricular experiences. So utilizing resources such as ONET. So ONET is an online database that can be really valuable in researching the specific skills that an employer is seeking within certain fields. So we've talked about those core 8 competencies, but if you're interested in looking up skills and keywords that are very specific to the type of work that you want to do when you graduate, ONET is a really good tool for being able to look up that information. It's onetonline.org. So ONET is put together by the U.S. Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So the information is supported by research. So I always encourage students, rather than just Googling skill sets for managers or something like that, I encourage students to maybe start with some databases that are, were pretty reliable, backed up by research. You can always supplement with other sources, but we utilize ONET quite a lot in our career coaching practice here at SFA. So and a lot of students aren't really familiar with it before we talk to them about it. So I wanted to introduce this to y'all as a good resource. So the site offers very detailed descriptions of the world of work for use by job seekers, workforce development, HR professionals, etc. So when you go into ONET, you can search by industry and field. There's a lot of different ways to utilize the search in there, or you can put in a specific job title. So for this presentation, we've utilized public relations specialist as our job title. So on here, you can see sample job titles, and a lot of different links that can connect you to different information about that job. But I'm going to pull up a little more specifically what I want to look at. So on ONET, it'll give you very specific skills, tasks, and abilities, that people hired for that kind of work are expected to be able to perform. So, you can see here that this shows the top 5, but there's a list total of 18 skills. The same with abilities. It shows you the top 5 that are needed, but there's a total of 15. So you can look in here and kind of expand these lists out to be able, again, to reflect on your own skills and experiences to start to generate some examples to talk about in interviews. So if you are looking for a more comprehensive list of skills that is specific to the field you want to work in, ONET is a great resource for being able to dig into that a little more deeply. So we've seen some of the skills that employers say that they're looking for in their new hires, but now I want to spend a minute talking about how new hires kind of stack up to these expectations. How do recent college graduates rate, how are they rating compared to what employers tell us that they're looking for? So this first chart shows, employers rate the essential need of the career readiness competency. So you can see this list of 8 competencies on here that I shared earlier. So NACE asked employers to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 being not essential at all and 5 being absolutely essential. So they were asked to rate how important, how essential these skills were. Again, this is, a sample of 150 employers, and so it's not huge, but it gives us some insight into what it is that they are looking for and kind of where those skills stack up. So we can see, critical thinking and problem solving, teamwork, those pop up at the top, and then showing global and multicultural fluency at the bottom. So not unimportant at all, but just it shows up at the bottom of this list. But so this tells us on a scale of 1 to 5 how essential this particular group of employers rates these skills. What we're going to look at next is the proficiency of recent college graduates. So when we compare how essential the employers say these skills are to how proficient recent college graduates are within these skill sets. So that's what we're looking at here. So the yellow shows, how essential that need is for the employer. In orange, it shows the average rating of recent college graduates by those employers. So, you know, what are some things maybe that y'all notice about this chart when we're looking at the skills that are considered to be essential by these employers versus how proficient their new hires are within these skill sets? What are some things that you guys maybe notice in here? Montana says we're super comfortable with technology. Molly says the professionalism is lacking. I would agree with both of those, that employers say that, you know, under half of their, you know, they would rate them as under half on that proficiency scale, oral and written communication. Yeah. So those are good, good insights within there. I see the question from Dawn about what do employers consider professionalism and work ethic. On the NACE website, you can see very detailed descriptions for each of these. And so they've got, you know, they provide those descriptions to the employers within that survey. So I don't have it right off the top of my head, and I can't exit out of the presentation to pull it up, but NACE does have very detailed descriptions of these that are provided in there. So if you want to see some context for kind of what they mean by that professionalism and that work ethic, I know that professionalism can be a bit of a loaded word. There's a lot of conversations going on of just kind of culturally, what are the effects of, you know, how do we perceive professionalism among different cultures and things like that. So I appreciate you asking that, Dawn, because I think it's worth going back to look at how NACE is specifically defining that. That may provide a little bit of context as to how the employers responded in there. So, you know, how do we graduate without competence in written communication? Oh, I know, you know, we look at this chart every year, and it's, you know, we see good things coming in a couple of areas. So teamwork and collaboration, it's pretty close in there. I think that this comes just from the bulk of group work and team activities that our students are doing. They tend to be involved in organizations. They are doing, if they're not involved in organizations, they're in classes that are requiring them to do group projects. And so you guys, you know, you seem to be stacking up pretty well within there. The information technology, that's another area where we're seeing that stack up nicely, that you guys are, you know, very familiar with technology. If you're not familiar with it, then, you know, you're able to catch on pretty quickly. You know, in our office, we hire interns every semester, and the students in our office, you know, we're a handshake school here. So the students who we hire as interns have utilized handshake from the student perspective, but when they start working for us, they have to get up to speed really, really quickly on the career services side of handshake. And I'm always surprised and just impressed at how quickly they're able to catch on to it. It's kind of a complicated system on the administrator side of it, but I think that just speaks to, you know, you guys are used to having to catch on to new platforms. I think in the past year with the pandemic that's even increased, because we all had to get real comfortable with a lot of technology that we maybe hadn't utilized before. I think other areas, you know, while the proficiency rating for global multicultural fluency is a little low, you know, we're exceeding the expectations on that. But, you know, I do think that this chart shows that there maybe is a lot of work to do within there. And so again, this is on the proficiency and not on the ability to articulate, but I think that this is important for college students to see, that if you're able to gain skills in these areas and demonstrate proficiency in these areas, both in your interview and then once you have the job, you can really stand out amongst some other people maybe in your peer group, because overall there's just a lot of areas where employers are maybe not as impressed as they could be. And so speaking to, you know, people who are members of a National Leadership Honor Society and knowing what goes into the circles throughout the country, and just I read all of the you know, Leader of the Year applications. I read the Clay Grant applications. I know the outstanding work that ODK student leaders are doing, both within their circles and within their other student organizations. So you guys are poised to really be able to stand out in some important ways, I think that we just want to be sure that you guys are able to effectively tell your story to help get your foot in the door. And then once you get the job, y'all are very likely to do great work and to really impress those employers. But this chart can sometimes be just a little bit eye-opening and seeing, you know, how well students feel like they're doing versus how employers are perceiving those new hires in there. Okay, so we've talked about the skills within there. I want to talk a little bit about some places that we can be gaining these skills. So a common comment that is made in career coaching and mock interviews, at least at my university, is, you know, students tell me when I do interviews with them, they'll exclusively talk about, you know, their part-time job maybe. And so, but I have a copy of their resume in front of me. So we go through the mock interview and they tell me about their paid work experience, but that's all they tell me about. And then at the end, when we're kind of doing feedback and just having a conversation about it, I'll say, well, tell me about your position as the vice president for Omicron Delta Kappa. Like, what do you just, you know, in person to person, tell me a little bit about what you do there. And they'll tell me about, you know, running meetings and creating agendas. And I planned this event and this and that. And I go, okay, so why didn't you tell me about any of that in your interview? And they'll say, oh, well, I really thought that employers only wanted me to tell them about work experience. Like, I thought that was what they were looking to hear about. So I only told you about the experience that I was paid for. And so one thing that I think is important for students to know is that employers are interested in experience, but experience can be very broad. You know, where are we gaining these skills? You want to think broadly about where you're gaining these skills and experiences. So paid work experience is great, but don't limit yourself to just talking about paid work experience. We want to look at that list of 8 skills, or look at those lists that maybe, you know, additional skills that you generate from ONET, and think about examples from a broad, you know, a diverse range of experiences. So some of the, before I show you guys my list, will y'all just put in the chat, tell me some examples from your collegiate experience where you feel like you have gained some of those 8 skills that the employers tell us that they're looking for. So what are some ways within college that you guys feel like you're gaining some of these skills and experiences? Teamwork and work ethic from athletics. Group project leader, learn to delegate and communicate clearly. Great. On-campus job, time management and computer skills. Awesome, Catherine, thank you. ODK, yeah. Getting involved in organizations that require group discussion, balancing classes and extracurriculars. Okay, great. Y'all are coming up with some really, really good ones here. So, you know, research, technology use in your field experience, planning online events. Carlina, I really like that example because I think that that is something that is here to stay in a lot of areas. And so the ability to coordinate, you know, great virtual events like the conference that we're in now. I think that's something that's going to continue to come up because I think that, you know, it showed us that there may be some ways to facilitate some of these events that maybe are more cost effective or allow more people to participate virtually. And while we, you know, love our in-person interactions, I don't think that virtual elements to events are going anywhere. So y'all came up with some really good ones in there. I'm going to show you guys my list. Okay, so these are just some of the areas that we tend to talk about a lot with our students. So paid positions, internships, research opportunities. One thing that I love reading from Leader of the Year applications is how many ODK students take part in faculty-led research and just the really rich experiences that students get from that. I love reading about that. Membership in student organizations, volunteering, study abroad. Another great way to talk about not only intercultural fluency, but problem solving, communication skills, teamwork. You know, you get lost in a city and you have to figure out how to get back. I speak from experience on that, you know, where I had to stumble through a foreign, you know, a city in a foreign country where I wasn't comfortable with the language, but I had to figure it out, you know. Leadership positions, Greek life, and group projects from classwork. So this is just my, you know, list. A lot of you guys mentioned some of these in the chat, which is great. But just, you know, this is just my way to encourage you guys to think broadly about these experiences. We're going to connect some of these a little bit back to those skills within there as well. So do students have, you know, as I mentioned, students have a perception that if they're not paid for it, then employers aren't interested in hearing about it. And so, you know, again, just a reminder that, you know, college gives you the opportunity to have a really rich and diverse set of experiences. And so to really think broadly about the skills that you're gaining through all the different ways that you're spending your time, any of those kinds of experiences can be used in interviews to articulate these skills. So don't feel like, you know, and students today, especially, students just have a really broad range of experiences. So there are, you know, non-traditional students, you know, who maybe are working full-time and just taking classes online and taking care of a family. You know, there are students who, for whatever, you know, who maybe don't have to work, that they're maybe on scholarship or have financial support from family. And so maybe they're not working, but they're taking part in a lot of different student organizations and leadership experiences. Student athletes are another one. You know, when I talk to our student athletes, we really encourage them to think deeply about their student athlete experience, because that doesn't leave them with a lot of time for work or for involvement. Sometimes they're too stretched thin with their practice schedules and their classes and their travel. But being a student athlete, you know, gives you great teamwork and communication and leadership skills. But again, we just have to really reflect on the skills that we're gaining. So I encourage you guys to think broadly about this, because it's going to help you when we go into the activity. So how do employers know that you have the skills? So what we're going to focus on here is thinking about this through an interview perspective and how we're articulating these skills verbally. But remember that, you know, you have to effectively articulate these skills on a resume and a cover letter before you even get in the door for an interview. If we had an hour and a half, we would maybe spend some more time talking about the resume and cover letter part of it and kind of the written aspect of articulating these skills. If we have any extra time at the end, I have a couple slides that are at the end that we can throw in if we've got a minute. But, you know, we have to be able to articulate these skills versus just stating the skill. This is another thing that students love to do when we do mock interviews with students. And I ask them a question like, you know, tell me about a time you demonstrated good communication skills. The answer I get back tends, more often than not, students will tell me about that communication skills are important. And so, you know, they feel like they have good communication skills because it's important to have good communication skills as a leader and this and that. So students will tend to kind of talk around the skill, or to simply say they have the skill. But to really articulate the skill, we need to offer up some proof of it. It's better to be able to offer an example of the skill than to just tell me about the skill. The same thing goes on resumes. You know, you got to think about how you're articulating the skills on a resume. So what you don't want to do is to have a skills section where you list those 8 skills. You need to be able to articulate them very clearly through your skills and experience. So through your bullet points, through your, you know, activities that are on there. So we need to be able to do that first on a resume and cover letter. Again, if we had all day, we would talk about both. But we're going to focus today on the interview part of it. I think the interview part makes students very nervous sometimes. And so I want to offer you guys some insight into how to articulate these skills. So again, our list of 8 here, this is the figures that were used in that chart to show students' proficiency in those 8 career readiness competencies. And then at the bottom, this shows some worksheets that we utilize within my office, where we encourage students to think about that transferable skill and different ways that they've gained that skill through those experiences. So, and just kind of generating a broad list of things that you could talk about, ways that you could try to convince the employer, I am able to delegate. Not only that I know that delegation is important, but what are some examples that I can offer from work, from class, and from my co-curricular activities that allow me to show you that I know how to delegate effectively. Different ways, again, and you guys identified some of these in here, you know, different things that we do as over the course of being in co-curricular activities where we can start to tie in some of these skills. So we think about being on committees to plan events. And so some of the skills that tend to come from committee work, leadership, teamwork, communication skills, event planning. Lots of us have to plan events for our groups. Those of you in Greek life would be very familiar with the idea of risk management. I know that is a very important part of standards and things like that. How are you mitigating risk for your members? We have to think about that in event planning for professional events as well. How are we keeping everyone safe? How are we keeping it organized? When you're in an officer role, it not only can give you leadership skills, but a lot of times it gives us great experience in conflict resolution as well as problem solving. They look to you in that leadership role to be able to help to solve problems that come up and to think creatively about how to solve problems. So some of the, thinking about how did we transition our initiation ceremony online? How have we done virtual meetings all year? Things like that. How have I solved problems in creative and effective ways for my organization? When you submit things for awards, or maybe you have to submit standards reports every year for your organization, that is a great example of written communication skills. How are you able to effectively articulate what you've done or what your organization has done to meet the standards for that award or for your standards for whatever your school requires for that? Member recruitment, a great skill within that is that intercultural fluency. How are we recruiting a diverse and inclusive new membership class each semester? How are we reaching out to people who maybe belong to populations that don't traditionally apply to ODK? So membership recruitment is a great area to think about intercultural fluency experience. Or marketing. How are we effectively telling the story of our organization to convince others that they want to be part of us? So now we're going to move into the practice part of it a little bit. So when we get asked these questions about specific skills and experiences that we have, a lot of times these are called behavioral questions. So you get questions like, tell me about a time when, give me an example of, tell me about a situation when. And so those types of questions are very specifically asking you for an example. So it can be a little frustrating as an interviewer when I say, well, tell me about a time that you demonstrated good communication skills. And instead of giving me a time, you just tell me about how communication skills are important. So it's going to help you guys to stand out in your interviews if you've reflected on those 8 skills and whatever else you're able to pull from other resources, and you've thought about examples ahead of time. What are examples that I could tell to prove to them that I have that skill and that I've utilized that skill in this experience? So what we recommend using in interviews is something called the STAR method. So the STAR method provides us with kind of a formula for storytelling. It allows us to be specific, but also to be brief. We don't want it to go on forever and ever, but it allows us the employer to envision how you might fit in within their team or within their company, because they have a very clear sense of how you've handled problems or situations that have come up in the past. So this is where we're going to practice this a little bit. So we're going to, I'm going to read the question, and then our tech facilitator is going to put you guys into breakout rooms. And I want you to practice offering an example using the STAR method. So again, with STAR, set the scene. Tell me what the situation was. The task, tell me what you had to do. The action, tell me what you did about it. And the result, tell me how it worked out. So if I were gonna, if I asked you a question relating to teamwork, excuse me, then, I may ask you, tell me about a time that, or something like this. So describe a successful project, assignment, or task that you had worked on as part of a team and what role you had in the project. So as an example of this, I'll give y'all an example for this first one. I might say, so in my, my business communication class, we were assigned to do a project about Henry Ford, and we had to, our task, we had to, put together a really interactive and involving presentation for the class. The action, so what did you do? So as a team, we thought about how we could be creative about it. We created a video, this and that, but also tell me what role you had in the project. So don't just focus on the team. Part of the question is, what role do you have in the project? So, tell me, so my role in the project was creating the slide deck, making sure that everything was cohesive. As a result, when we delivered our presentation to a class of about 40 people, we got really excellent feedback from our professor. And so as a result, we got a really good grade on the project. So that's just a very quick example of how to utilize the STAR method. But you can see that it involves a little bit more than, telling me, oh, well, I work really hard on a team and I tend to be the team leader. Instead, it offers me a very specific example of a project that you worked on. It tells me what part you had in that project. And then as a result of that team effort, what was the result? So tell me how it worked out. So you could offer up an example from ODK or being a student athlete, maybe that your team, worked together over the course of the season and ultimately were conference champions or something like that. There's a lot of different examples we can offer that can articulate the skill of teamwork. But so we're gonna put you guys into breakout rooms. I think there's gonna be 3 people in each room. You're gonna have a few minutes to each take a turn answering this question. I will put the question in the chat to the meeting rooms so y'all can see it within there. But so we'll go ahead and put y'all into breakout rooms and take a minute and offering examples to each other of teamwork. How are you going to articulate that skill of teamwork?
All right, you guys ready? All right, looks like majority of folks have joined.
Okay.
Except for group 1 for some reason. Abigail, maybe I'll move Abigail.
Are you able to send a message to the groups in there?
I can.
Okay. Can you put that question in there? I can drop it into the chat if you just want to copy and paste it.
Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat and I'll send it over to everybody.
Okay. There it is.
All right, it was sent out.
Okay, thank you.
So what time you want to bring them back?
We'll give them about four minutes. Well,
So 2:17
yeah,
ish? Okay.
I think we'll
Sounds
be
good.
able to get through 2 of these. Eve Marie, thank you for adding in the resources into the chat. That's helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. I was just wanted to make sure that they remembered what the links were,
Yeah,
just in case.
I appreciate it.
I teach, so it's kind of a force of habit too.
Yeah.
If we have time at the end of the session, it would be nice if everyone could turn their cameras on so that we can get a group photo.
Okay.
I'm closing off the room in about 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. Welcome back, y'all. Sorry, my Texan came out, y'all. Okay. So as we're getting everybody back into the room, how did that go? How did it feel to articulate your experience with teamwork?
If folks want to unmute and say they can.
Yeah, y'all can, it's helpful to practice. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with y'all unmuting yourselves to answer it if you want to.
Okay, I'll hop in. I just felt like I almost put myself down in relation to other members of my team and said, I helped them, I learned how to delegate and give away work. So that was an interesting thing I noticed.
Yeah, with teamwork, I think a lot of times we tend to focus on the group and the group outcome, which is great. But with teamwork, the teamwork question, you have to be careful to, not overshadow yourself and not to kind of, defer too much to others in there. You want to think, because they're interviewing you and they want to hire you. And so hopefully, we want to think about what ways we can acknowledge the team and the group effort while still talking about the individual contribution that we were able to make to that effort. I think too, in the chat, so insightful to hear the examples that other people gave. I would agree with that. I think with these, when you're in a group with people who are your peers, it's helpful to hear what other examples people give, because that can sometimes help to generate examples for us too. We're like, oh, I do that. Why did I not talk about that? It's another reason why at the end of mock interviews, when we do feedback, we tend to work with this, ask the students questions about that, because a lot of times you guys know it, you have a great understanding of your own skills. It's just that you've never kind of put two and two together and talked about it that way in that context. So I'm going to give you all one more chance to practice these real quick, and then we'll come back with some kind of final closing thoughts. So this next question is, what specific technologies do you have a working knowledge of, and provide a specific example of a time when you used them successfully. So we'll have it sent out as a message to you guys in the breakout rooms as well, but I'm going to have you guys practice one more time, focusing on that information technology application skill, you know, telling them what are the skills that you have when it comes to technology. So if we can go ahead and put them into the breakout rooms, we'll send out the question and then we'll come back together for some final thoughts. Can we drop them back into their breakout rooms?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, what time do you want to pull them back?
Let's give
Another
them, yeah.
And we're back.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So how did it feel to answer this question in relation to technology?
I found it easier to answer than the teamwork one, just because I feel like the teamwork one is very subjective based, whereas this one, either you know the technology or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easier to answer.
Meg, when you answered it, did you include an example of, you know, how you've utilized it, or did you just include the technologies that you're familiar with?
I half list, kind of half and half.
Yeah.
I listed off some of the things I know, and then I kind of explained why I know them,
Yeah.
and how I've utilized them, especially this past year.
Okay. I think that's great. That's what we want to aim for, because the question is a two-parter, which those can be a little challenging, but it is asking for kind of a list. So tell me some of the technology that you're familiar with, but then it asks for that example. So I think not only telling them, you know, Excel and PowerPoint or Canva or Zoom, but then giving a little bit of proof. It doesn't have to be an extensive example, but telling them, you know, I've utilized Excel as part of a group project in order to build pivot tables or, you know, whatever. So just giving them a little bit of proof behind it of, yep, I not only am telling you that I know Excel, but I can utilize some of the language that, you know, will kind of help to prove that I do in fact know Excel. Lots of people tell me that they know Office and they know Word, and then I see the documents that they create and I go, do we really? Do we really? And so being able to offer some insight into that experience will just kind of help to prove that a little more to the employer. All right. So as we finish up thinking about, you know, as you're practicing for, you know, looking at practicing for interviews, lots of different ways to generate, you know, lists of skills. So ONET, looking at job listings is another great way. If you do know the type of work that you want to do, go ahead and start looking at some job listings that can give you some insight into what are the keywords and skills that they may be asking you about in the interviews. Informational interviews, another great way, you know, pick the brain of someone who works in your field. I will always advocate for talking to your campus career services office. You know, doing career coaching and mock interviews will help you to feel more prepared and give you some feedback in articulating these skills. So lots of different ways to generate these lists of skills. So that said, before we wrap up, any questions or comments or anything that you guys want to ask? All right. I think that Eve Marie has said, I'm going to stop my share. They have asked us to turn on cameras for a group photo. And so we're going to leave a minute to do that. So everybody, yeah, I like fix the hair, everything, I know. While we do that, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. If you guys have any questions or anything, or if I can be helpful to you guys as a resource, please feel free to reach out. But thank you so much for your time and your questions and participation today.